Well, hi, everyone, and thank you for coming here to this presentation of, as Dr. Clark just said, I Can Dream, Can't I? Based on an old Gershwin tune, visioning a new Christian community in urban spaces. Have to see about what I'm doing here. And so we begin. Within a year of the COVID lockdown, St. Paul's Eastern United Church in the downtown neighborhood of Sandy Hill in Ottawa closed its doors. One of the larger effects of this was to leave the downtown area of Ottawa without a United Church presence. As well as having provided a faith home for the housed populations of the neighborhood, the former church also had served the homeless and the indigenous populations, as well as the students. In the rest of the downtown area, the United Church presence is currently minimal. There's one church on the outskirts of the southwestern part of downtown, so quite far from Sandy Hill. And it is viable and doing some really, really good work. There's another church, they sold their building and the congregation only has use of it on Sunday mornings and on high holidays. So not as viable as far as building community church might be concerned. That leaves a United Church gap in the downtown area of Ottawa. And in the Reformed tradition, the United Church has a distinct charism among the mainline churches with its creed that says we are not alone and welcoming people from all backgrounds and orientations. The United Church nationally has now committed itself to creating 100 new communities of faith over the next few years. It is having some success already, especially among new migrant communities and intercultural communities. Now, while my particular interest is in the United Church, the question this research project asks does have a broader application. How can a new community of faith be brought into being in an urban setting? To discover what a new faith community could look like, as well as to be in an urban setting like Sandy Hill, this project is two-pronged in its research. One prong was to interview people of the United Church in official capacities to better understand their vision of what new communities, their vision of growing new communities. The second was to interview a few of the people who led the successful effort to build a new community in the Anglican Church of St. Albans, which is in Sandy Hill. Indeed, St. Albans serves as to be the case study on which my research is based. Without going into too much detail, there had been a community of faith at St. Albans previous to 2011, but that community of faith left the Anglican Communion, and so the bishop wanted an Anglican community at that church. So he appointed a new parish priest with the object of building a new community. The appointment took place in March 2011, and the community was to be in place by July 1st of that same year. So they didn't have a lot of time. At the same time, the bishop and the director of Center 454, there's some slides. Oh, yes, that's right. And the director of Center 454, which is a community outreach in Sandy Hill, came to an agreement about the center moving back to the church as they had been kicked out by the former congregation some years before. So a lot going on in a very short amount of time. Again, the original question is, how can a new community of faith be brought into being in an urban setting? Case study methodology makes a lot of sense in this project, as the case is so well aligned with the goals of the project. The Anglican Church is in the same part of town, and the former Anglican community was shut down. Moreover, the vision for the community was for a new community, not a renewed community. In addition, outreach to the people who are unhoused was a consideration in building a new community. The focus of this project is on vision. The interviews were meant to engender responses that concentrate on how one might envision a new church community. So the questions that I asked were about the visioning and how that vision is discerned, on the identified priorities, on the people to be served, and on the core values, beliefs, and principles that were important. As a result of the expertise that I was able to tap into with the participants who were interviewed, 4 themes developed: getting to know your neighborhood, defining your community, discerning your ministry, and practice, practice, practice. And so, as I said, St. Albans is in Sandy Hill. And just to give you a better idea of the neighborhood, it is beside the Rideau River, which runs through Ottawa. And like many Ottawa neighborhoods, it is mixed. It has a number of middle class and upper middle class residences, as well, and even embassies, as well as affordable housing. It's also home to the University of Ottawa, and that includes student housing. Also in the neighborhood are social services, specializing in assisting the unhoused and the poor. The Ottawa Mission, which has evolved from, as they say, from simply serving as a shelter to provide all tools people need to rebuild their lives, extending mercy, dignity, and compassion to all who enter their doors. St. Joseph's Supper Table is a meal and food sharing ministry with an average of 100 clients per day. They also hold a food bank for Sandy Hill residents each week. Center 454, which is the outreach that is co-located in St. Albans Church, it seeks, their website says, to create a safe space for people looking for community and connection. They provide laundry, showers, hygiene supplies, telephone access, Wi-Fi access, and community navigation support. Social activities include bingo and karaoke, arts and crafts. Envisioning a new community in an urban space, it's important to get to know the neighborhood in which you hope to build. St. Albans, the people who were building the community in Sandy Hill for St. Albans, pulled the census data. They looked to see who was in the neighborhood. They walked the neighborhood and talked to people to better understand who was in the neighborhood. And then they looked at other churches and other community supports in the neighborhood. This is especially important in an urban space. Getting into the neighborhood and getting to know people, being curious about who they are, what their interests are, what their needs are. In an urban context, you will most likely be dealing with a diverse community. And in the case of Sandy Hill, the population is diverse, especially in terms of income and age. Getting to know the neighborhood is important because it's from the community that you will be building your community of faith. The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 10 says, whatever town or village you enter, search there for some worthy person and stay at their house until you leave. Search there. As you enter the home, give it your greeting. If the home is deserving, let your peace rest on it. If it is not, let your peace return to you. If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, leave that home or town and shake the dust off your feet. The neighborhood really is important in the discernment of new community. First and foremost is that the community of faith you are building understand itself as a people of God, a community of Christ. The people building the new community of St. Albans spread the word through email and Facebook which was very unusual for a church at that time. They had an open invitation to all who might be interested in coming to meetings about what the new community could look like. To envision a new faith community in Sandy Hill, it begins with the church, not the church building. It was one of the bigger questions that I had coming into this project. How do you start a community of faith from scratch? Well, you have to put the word out. You have to invite people in. For St. Albans, that included any and all that might be interested in what this community of faith in Christ can do, especially what this community of faith can be. When we look at the letters of Paul and those attributed to him, in each of these letters and epistles, his greeting is clearly in the name, action, and love of Christ. From the earliest documents of the church, we see this clear identification of being a community in Christ and building the community based on Christ. Before deciding on some of the more practical matters, including in some cases, but not at St. Albans, where it might be housed, the community of faith needs to discern its ministry. It will be hard for a community of faith to go forward without an understanding of the ministry God intends for it to help fulfill. At St. Albans, with their understanding of who they were, Christ-centered, how they functioned, spirit-led, and who they served, their urban neighborhood, they were able to build their ministry. Even though they were, for a number of months, a small core of 20 people, and there were many challenges, their vision of their ministry kept carrying them forward. And again, in the letters of St. Paul, right, we see the importance of how a Christian community defines itself. Paul chastising the Galatians for deserting their identity so quickly, while in 2 Corinthians congratulating them on keeping focused on their ministry of reconciliation with God. If you've got to know your neighborhood, if you've centered yourself as a community of Christ, if you have discerned your ministry, then you practice. You practice all the things you do, and your practice must be directed on that. It keeps the community focused, it keeps the community engaged. When St. Albans was first considering as to whether or not their initial meetings should be invitation only or whether they should be open, they leaned on their tagline of being spirit-led. And that meant that the Spirit was going to determine who was going to show up. And it was from the people who showed up that led them to realize who they could serve. The housed neighbors, sure, but also the unhoused, the students as well, and people who identified as LGBTQI2S, a very diverse population that was also younger than many church populations. Many of the people who were housed in the neighborhood had a real problem with the fact that Center 454 was going to be relocated to the church and into the neighborhood. It was a case of NIMBYism. There were all kinds of meetings where the housed population of the neighborhood was quite angry. One person came up to the former parish priest and said, "Good luck in starting a church where everyone hates you." But the community of faith and the people who were participating in the center relied on each other and supported each other. And the beauty of that is how many in the neighborhood came round, and some even joined the congregation. When questions come up about how to go forward, base everything you know on your aspirations and practice those. What is remarkable to me is how these themes are so centered on the great commandments that Jesus clarified for us. As found in Mark, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. And the second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. And in the urban context that we are studying, one of my respondents added, and love your neighborhood. Look closely at the neighborhood to determine what a new community of faith could discern as its ministry. Perhaps look, in the case of the United Church, if starting a community does not seem viable, maybe looking to support St. Albans and Sandy Hill might be more helpful to the underserved population in that neighborhood. But the lovely thing that I heard was that if a new united community were to come forth in faith and in ministry in that neighborhood, St. Albans would be ready to help in any way they can. The themes that came forward as a result of the case study of St. Albans can go a long way to helping discern considerations for building a new community of faith in an urban area. Getting to know the neighborhood and the needs in the neighborhood is very important in order to better understand what a new community could bring. Bringing together people who discern themselves as part of the body of Christ in that neighborhood is another important piece. The third theme that comes through clearly from the interviews is the need for the community itself to define itself based on ministry, based on the understanding of itself in the neighborhood and what it hopes to build. And finally, based on all of these three, to remain focused on your neighborhood, on your identity as a community of Christ, and on your ministry. As a final couple of thoughts, seeing that my own interest is in the United Church, there might be a need to consider how the decision is made in the first place to think about building a faith community. It is true that when people hear the word vision and they think that we are at the beginning of a large and arduous process, and with the only result perhaps being a tagline. But as this case study shows, a vision can come together very quickly with the actualization, along with the actualization. The trick is once you have an understanding of where you are, who you are, and what your ministry is, it gives you the ability to understand that putting together that vision can be done quickly. And it can be done at the same time as you mix in the practicalities. As one of my respondents talked about, with respect to the United Church, our Congregationalist roots has meant that we have a history of allowing communities to come forward by their own volition. This is not how St. Albans made a decision to build a new community in the old building. It was the bishop that directed this to happen. This case study shows that it might be necessary that where the United Church has abandoned postal codes, as one of my respondents said, over the past 10 years, it is the church that commits itself to making decisions about bringing forth new communities instead of waiting for them to spring up. Something to consider at any rate, if there are places, especially in urban settings, where the United Church has come to the conclusion that abandoning those postal codes was a mistake. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you to the people who participated in this project, both of those who led St. Albans back into the Sandy Hill community, and to the leadership who were very helpful as well in the United Church. Your vision, your time, and your interest are the basis for everything here. Drs. Clark and Sinos for being so supportive and even enthusiastic about this project. For all the ways they took me through my angst about it. They are so knowledgeable and so out there with their willingness to ensure that their students succeed. Dr. Andy O'Neill, who was my consultant, gave me all kinds of ideas how I could proceed on this venture. Andy, you are in my prayers and have my everlasting gratitude for your support, not only through this project, but everything that you have been to me as a teacher and human being. To all my classmates, you've challenged me, you've reckoned with me, and you have supported me. Thank you for that. All and sundry. Well, there might have been a better way to put that. But it includes my family, many of whom are here. Thank you so much. It includes my educational supervisor, Teresa Burnett-Cold, who is also here, and all of my mentors and supporters along the way. Thank you for your understanding. Thank you for your support. Thank you for being there. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Patricia, thank you so much. Wonderful. Well done. Really excited. What we're going to do now is we're going to move into anyone can put their hand up. So rather than having the format of having to type things out, what we're going to do now is simply receive questions and thoughts. But before we do that, as we did this morning, I'm going to invite us into about 30 seconds just to sit with what you said and contemplate and hold it in our hearts and our minds and our imagination. So if with me for the next 30, 35 seconds, we could just pause and drink in the wisdom of Patricia. Great. Welcome back. Questions, comments, thoughts?
If you have a question, please feel free to just raise your digital hand using the button on the bottom under, I think it's reactions, and we can unmute you and you can share.
Oh, this might be easy.
No, it's not going to be easy. Heather.
Your conversation about the conversations you'd had with St. Albans and out of your United Church background, and because we're AST, can you talk about the ecumenical nature of this conversation? That it's, we've got an Anglican community here that restarted. It could have been a United Church community. It could have been a Presbyterian community. And then one of the other denominational communities comes into the same area and says, should we start to, how do you have the conversation ecumenically, but also recognizing the specific charisms that each of our tradition could bring to an area?
Sure. I alluded a little bit to that ecumenical piece. It was absolutely, I only alluded to it a little bit because I only had so much time, but absolutely, I started the conversation with, I was very lucky because the pastor currently at St. Albans used to be sharing a space with the United Church, and I know that minister very well, and he's the one who directed me there. So right off the bat, I had an introduction, and it was wonderful to be able to talk to people who are in Sandy Hill, and that was really the way that I placed it. Was that yes, I'm a United Church person. Yes, I feel that there's a lack, but on the other hand, the research has shown me that maybe it's not a United Church, right? Which is what I alluded to a little bit, is that maybe what it is that the United Church supports St. Albans. If we want to get back into that. Sorry, I'm looking at your picture instead of looking at the screen. And sorry, at my camera. Sorry about that. That maybe it's that we support somehow St. Albans, or maybe we start. One of my respondents talked about that maybe if there are people who are United Church people in Sandy Hill, but there's only 5 or 10 of them that are interested in being community, maybe we go walking to St. Albans and ask, to join them, and then maybe maybe we could have on a Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening, do a United Churchy prayer thing or something like that. You know, like, I mean, there are absolutely ways that you can be ecumenical. And I think, to me, ecumenism always starts with being open to hearing those messages. Yeah, I started off a little bit on the United Church front, but that didn't last long, especially in light of the responses that I was getting, not only, I have to say, not only from the Anglican Church, which was fantastic, but also from my own church, like really talking about being out there with other churches. Does that get to your question?
It does, thank you.
Hey, Teresa. Is that, yeah, I think I see Teresa.
Yeah. It's very interesting. So the St. Paul's Eastern that closed, half of their congregation did come to the church that I pastor, which is always an awkward kind of moment. They didn't want to amalgamate. They wanted to close and do something else. There is, however, a project in that area that right now there's a Francophone United Church in that building. Not planning to stay at the moment, but planning to be back in their own building, which is also in the downtown. The interesting thing about that to me, and I'd be curious what you think, that Francophone congregation is almost completely of African descent. And many of them are first generation immigrants to the country, and they're really interested in making common cause with Indigenous folks in the downtown area. Now, is the project at St. Albans looking at that particular demographic, or are they mixed in with everybody else?
I have to say that I did not ask that question, and I was not focusing on particular groups of particular cultural groups. But my understanding is that it would be a mix. Of course, you know, you say that, and yet the Indigenous population is disproportionately part of the underhoused population, right? So, but no, it is a mix. It is people in need in general. While the old St. Paul's Eastern actually did have a charism for Indigenous people. They were actually looking to try to deepen their connections with Indigenous peoples.
Yeah, thank you.
Ruth, did you want to ask something?
Actually, I was trying to just be there for you.
Oh, thank you. I'll speak. Thank you so much.
I was interested in, though, how into a community that it almost get a bigger view of what's possible in establishing a congregation that hasn't been there.
Okay, so I'm sorry, there was at one point I got reverb in your question. Could you repeat the beginning of it, please?
Okay, sorry. I was just reflecting out loud the importance of reaching out to all denominations in the effort to establish a congregation where one isn't or one used to be. That the approach needs to be really wide, is what struck me.
Yeah, it does, and I think that that's actually another thing. Again, I could only just touch on it, but that St. Albans has done quite well. Is they really have reached out to the students. They've reached out to the underhoused. They've reached out to the housed. They've reached out, you know, to they've really tried to bring in to the queer communities as well. They've really tried to make sure that they have broadened their reach to the people that they found in their neighborhood. but it really was quite centered. They're not, for some people, they're a destination church, but that is not how they framed themselves to be a destination church. They have absolutely framed themselves to be a neighborhood church. So all of that to say that when you have a church like that, how could a new community be doing something that is different and yet serves, right? And that is the question that you can only find out by people who feel that there's more to do. They do that because they know the neighborhood. They've gone into the neighborhood and they've figured that out. Now, it is possible that downtown, you could absolutely have more of what one respondent framed to me that was different from an urban or downtown neighborhood church. You can have a city center church where actually you are looking to be a destination church, where you are trying to build. So, and the best example of that in Canada is Metropolitan Church in Toronto, right? Like, I mean, it is absolutely considers itself a destination church. Most of the people around the country have heard about it for what they do and what their charism is. So you can do that in a downtown too, but that gets a little bit away from that neighborhood piece that was so strong at St. Albans. Does that answer your question, Ruth?
Yes, thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
So I'll ask a question while people are collecting their thoughts. And we talked about this at the very outset of you doing this project. And so, and I have an answer to this question already. So I'm gonna throw it to you though anyway, Patricia. Why should the United Church, Anglican Church, Roman Catholic Church, Presbyterian Church go in urban areas, right? I mean, you've already talked about closing, but why is it important for the church, particularly the United Church, but any church, to be in the urban core of a city like Ottawa or Toronto or Halifax or Winnipeg, Victoria, Vancouver? Why is it important to be there?
Yeah, and I look to St. Albans and I would say that they would say because the neighborhood has the need. It has a need for a community of faith. It has a need for a vision that only a Christ-centered community can bring. It isn't just about what did one of my respondents said, it isn't about having a bunch of do-gooders around. It is about that charism that being a Christian a church can bring to a neighborhood to help them build community, because that's what we're about. That's what we're centered on. That is indeed, that is the whole love God and love your neighbor right there, right? So it would be, that's what they do. And it was interesting to me that one of the things that one of the respondents told me was that I have to get this right, a service provider, a charitable organization that provides service to the neighborhood, according to Ottawa bylaws, cannot be housed in a church unless there is an active congregation in that church that supports them. So even in our bylaws, there is a link that is made. I mean, obviously there are services that are not attached to churches, but the bylaws recognize that strong affiliation that is needed for people who are centered in a neighborhood. Did I get to your question, Jody? Sorry, Dr. Clark.
Yeah. No. Your initial call me Jody. It's okay. But you've been doing all term. So no, it's spot on, and that's exactly it. I mean, we have a responsibility to be there. It's a part of creating that environment, creating that space, creating something different. And if we're there, there's a presence. If we're not there, that doesn't happen. So
right.
Yeah, I think it's spot on. You did a great job answering that question. So, and that's really one of the reasons I was so excited about your project. So, one of the many, but that's good. I'll turn it over to others if others have other questions. I have a couple more, but I'll turn it to others. I'm not gonna, so Dave has a question. Dave Sinis, Dave.
Yeah, I have a question actually. I'm sitting here with Samuel Landry as we are running the tech, and we've been having conversations the past couple of days about all involved in tech and the difference between in person and digital, and what's amazing about your presentation and the research you did is how grounded it is in the reality of a physical community, a local community. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to that, as many of us after the pandemic are wondering, how do we make the most of the fact that a lot of us have gone digital in the work we do as churches, and reflect on the fact that St. Albans is really one based on a physical presence.
So St. Albans does have has gone with technology as well as a result of the pandemic. That's not really where the focus of my research was, but they have some people. It is not as big a crowd as they used to get, although they one of the biggest losses for them was the closing of the university for so many months. And going online, but the students are coming back and they're starting to rebuild their connection to the church. And also, that is something that they are working to do. In fact, when we talked about ecumenism, the parish priest of St. Albans is actually working with the youth coordinator of growth with the United Church to build connections with the student population again on campus as part of the chaplaincy, but also just part of the trying to get them out and bring them into the neighborhood and make them realize what the opportunities are spiritually for them in and around the school. So they are looking at how to do it, but there's no doubt they're having to do it in a different way after COVID. And it is incremental as far as getting people back. But the people who really never got to go online are the people that are served out of Center 454 and that also come to the church. There are unhoused people, they're part of the congregation there. In fact, the congregation has a number of the congregants have taken specialized training in helping to resolve conflict in case there's a mental health crisis or something like that happens in the congregation. Almost all of them are trained in how to give someone naloxone. And so it is, those underhoused people, they never went online. And they are still there and they are still being served both by the church and by Center 454. And the other thing that I would say about being online is that although it's kind of away from being in-person community, one of the reasons that I thought that was kind of neat, I almost blurred my background. Then I thought, no, you know what? I want to see people where I'm coming from. I live in Ottawa. This is my house. This is my office, home office. And sometimes you can get a sense of community even when you're online, when people are in their own spaces. That's my kitchen back there with my messy fridge that has a bunch of stuff on it. So you get an idea of people. And so there's kind of like, we're not going to lose the online piece, but we should be able to make it part of the community we're building. Did I get to what you wanted there, Dave?
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you.
Good. We have time for one or two more questions, and then we need to take a break. I'll just offer comment and see if it filters into a question. Years ago, so when I studied theology back in the ancient times in the late 70s and early 80s, I was actually assigned to Holy Trinity Church, which is in Toronto, which is a church right beside Eaton Center. And so this is, so imagine the time. And it was the first Anglican church in Canada that really had a high, in those days, just gay population, not necessarily, they weren't even saying lesbian population, but a high gay population. And so it became a real, it became a safe place for a gay population. I'm wondering about the prophetic voice of a church in an urban area. And I know you're not talking about a destination church or boutique churches, which we sometimes see popping up, but is there something that, particularly given the United Church's track record and really asking critical questions about the nature of love and justice, that's really critical that the United Church be in those places, just beyond an ecumenical optic, but a United Church optic? Patricia, something really special about the United Church being in that downtown core that's so essential to the fabric of a city and to a country. Any thoughts?
Oh, well, it would be almost strictly my own thoughts. My research didn't really go there. I certainly, although one of my respondents did actually say, and it was a United Church respondent who said this, that we have that charism. Absolutely, it's in our DNA as United Church people. But there's a lot of cases where we've kind of not only have some other churches surpassed us, but we've been laughed on our growth. Like I think that the issue of that you would hear today is about on the gender issues, and the United Church is there in so many ways, but not is it as uniform as it once was? Are we as have we been as quick off the mark as maybe other churches, etc.? So that was a question that was raised by one of my United Church respondents. But I would say that the thing is that if you know churches, the United Church is one of those. And yes, in the downtown area, that is huge. I am surprised at how many people, the ones who don't know churches, don't know that about the United Church. They are surprised that there is a Christian church out there that has that up front as part of their message. So, and I'm not giving you an answer to your question. I'm just, these are my thoughts about it. Yeah.
No, that's super. Unfortunately, we do need to tie. I don't see anyone else with a hand up, so we're going to have to pause at this point. A fascinating study, and I think really critical for our churches. I hope people come back to your study time and time again. It had resonant tones with a number of things we've been talking about, but also Blaine's topic about putting out there, being in the middle of the community, being a presence and allowing people to come to it. And so I really appreciate your creativity, your ecumenical spirit, your capacity to ask really critical questions. I think it's a really vital issue for us as a church to wrestle with. And I appreciate your prophetic voice and your optimism for inner city ministry. So thank you so much. Well
Thank
done.
you. And thank you to everybody who came on. Thank you. Thank you. And
Good.
thanks to everybody who came on. Bye-bye.
Super.